I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My name's David, and I've been with my wife, Lisa, for 8 years. We were supposed to get married in 3 days. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. She was the kind of woman who always knew how to turn on the charm, make me feel like I was the only guy in the world. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I genuinely believed she loved me, and I loved her. From the start, there were little signs that something was off lately. She's been more secretive with her phone, hiding messages, sometimes even taking calls in the bathroom or outside. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe she just needed some space or was stressed with wedding planning. But then, little things started adding up. She'd come home late without explaining, and when I'd ask, she'd brush it off with some bitchy comment about how I was overreacting or being paranoid. The biggest red flag was her attitude. She'd snap at me more often, call me clingy or insecure, which wasn't like her at all. She'd say I was reading too much into her actions, that I needed to trust her. And I wanted to, I really did. I loved her and I thought she loved me back. But inside, a nagging voice kept telling me something was wrong, something she wasn't telling me. One night I decided to check her phone after she went to bed. I know that sounds invasive, but I'd been feeling uneasy for weeks and I needed answers. I stayed up, quietly unlocking her phone, and that's when I saw it. A series of texts. Not just innocent messages, but flirty, suggestive, downright explicit texts with someone named Jake. The name hit me like a punch in the gut. Jake was her best friend's brother. I remember him coming over a few times. I always thought he was a decent guy, maybe a little too friendly, but I never suspected anything. What really tore me apart was discovering that these messages were from just 3 days before our wedding. 3 days before I was supposed to marry her, she was sexting Jake, calling him hot, saying she wanted to see him and even talking about having sex with him. The messages weren't just playful, they were hot and heavy with plans to meet up. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. I felt this horrible mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she cheat on me just before the biggest day of my life? I kept staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. I told myself I should confront her immediately, but a part of me wanted to wait to see if I was misreading something or overreacting. But deep down, I knew. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Later that night, I sat in the dark, holding her phone, feeling like I'd been blindsided. It was like a punch I didn't see coming. I'd trusted her completely, and now I was questioning everything. Was she cheating? Or was I just blind all along? The crazy thing is, I kept asking myself if I was just ignoring the signs or if I'd always been blind to the truth. Because now, I couldn't look at her the same way. The next morning, I couldn't sleep. My mind was already racing, replaying everything I'd found. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without talking to her. Still, the urge to confront her was overwhelming. I didn't want to lose her, not yet, but I also knew I couldn't go on like this, living in this secret hell. When she finally woke up, I could see the tension in her face. She was pretending everything was normal, that fake smile she always had. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, trying to gauge her reaction. She tried to kiss me to act like nothing was wrong, but I pulled back. That's when I told her I knew about the messages. Her face froze for a second, then the bitchy smirk came on her face. "Oh, so you've been snooping, huh?" she said, rolling her eyes. "You really need to get a life, David. Maybe if you spent less time spying on me, we'd have a better relationship." She brushed past me, heading toward the bathroom like she didn't care. But I wasn't about to let her brush it off that easily. I asked her outright, "Who is Jake? Why were you sexting him 3 days before our wedding?" Her reaction was priceless. She looked at me with this condescending glare and said, "It's none of your business. I was just talking to my friend. You're so paranoid." She laughed like this was some big joke. That made my blood boil. I couldn't believe how she was acting, like I was the crazy one for trusting her, for believing we had something real. I knew I had to get the truth. I pressed harder, asking her if she was cheating, if she was with Jake or anyone else. She rolled her eyes again, looked me up and down, and said, "You're overreacting. Honestly, you're so insecure. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with control, I wouldn't have to hide things from you." Her tone was bitter, bitchy, and I could see she was starting to get defensive. That's when I realized she was trying to gaslight me to make me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything. But I already knew. Deep down, I knew she was lying. I just didn't have the proof yet. The pain was starting to settle in, but I wasn't about to let her brush this off as if it was nothing. I told her I was done talking. I needed time to think, to process what I just discovered. But inside, I was already planning what I was going to do next. I couldn't believe I was about to marry someone who could do this, who could lie so effortlessly, who could betray me like this. And the worst part, I still loved her, even as I felt my world crumbling apart. That day was a blur. I kept replaying everything I'd learned, trying to figure out how I missed all the signs. Did I really know her at all? Or was I just blind to the truth from the very beginning? I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. How could someone I trusted so much turn out to be capable of cheating on me, especially just days before our wedding? I decided I needed to get some perspective. I couldn't just confront her again without solid proof or a clear plan. So I went to a friend's house, someone I could trust, and I told him everything. I needed someone to talk to who would judge me. My friend Mike listened patiently, then said, "Dude, you gotta accept that she's not the person you thought she was. You can't marry someone who's been lying to you this whole time. It's better to cut your losses now." That was a brutal truth, but it hit home. I couldn't go through with the wedding knowing she'd been screwing around behind my back. I decided I'd confront her again that night, with a clear head and maybe some evidence in hand. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some naive guy who didn't see through her lies. When I got back home, she was waiting in the living room, acting like nothing had happened. She was texting on her phone, her usual bitchy smirk on her face. I looked at her and finally said, "I know about Jake. I saw the messages, and I know you've been lying to me. So tell me, are you cheating on me? Did you sleep with him?" Her eyes widened for a second, then she rolled her eyes again and scoffed. "Are you seriously ruining your last days of being a bride over some stupid messages? Grow up, David. You're making a huge deal out of nothing." She pulled out her phone, pretending to ignore me, acting like she was the victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her, "It's not just some messages. I caught you. You lied about who Jake is. You lied about everything, and I deserve honesty, not your bullshit excuses." That's when she finally snapped. Her face clamped down and she spat, "You're so insecure. You're just jealous because I don't want some boring, controlling guy who can't handle a little fun. Maybe I should have just done what I wanted all along." Her words cut me deeper than I thought possible. I felt my jaw tighten as anger and heartbreak hit me like a ton of bricks. How could she be so cold, so ruthless? I'd loved her, I'd trusted her, and now I was left standing there, realizing she'd been planning her betrayal all along. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but instead, it was turning into the day I found out my wife was a liar, a cheat, and a user. I told her I was done. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies. I needed to get out, to figure out what to do next. That night, I packed a bag, called a friend to crash with, and left her there, sulking and pretending she wasn't a piece of shit. I didn't sleep much that night. All I could think about was how my entire world had turned upside down in just a few days. I was supposed to marry her, but instead, I was waking up to the reality that the woman I loved had been sleeping with my best friend all along. I thought I was blindsided, but maybe I always was. Maybe I was just too afraid to see the truth before it hit me in the face. The days that followed were the hardest I've ever gone through. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare where everything was falling apart, piece by piece. I kept asking myself if I'd missed all the signs, if I was just blind to her lies, or if she had been secretly planning this all along. The worst part was trying to process that I'd nearly married someone who had no respect for me, or for the vows she was supposed to keep. I didn't want to make any rash decisions, but the pain and betrayal were eating me up inside. I started to see things differently. Her bitchy, dismissive attitude, her constant lies, the way she always found a way to turn things around on me. It was clear she was a master manipulator, and I'd been so caught up in our perfect life that I never saw her true colors until it was too late. I realized I'd been so blinded by love that I'd ignored the warning signs screaming at me. One night, I decided I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I knew I had to confront her again, the woman who was supposed to be my future wife but who now felt like a stranger. I called her and told her I was coming over. When I arrived, she was still acting like the queen of the world, acting as if she'd done nothing wrong. I saw her smirk when I entered, knowing she thought she was untouchable. I didn't waste time. I looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "Did you sleep with Jake? Be honest with me. I deserve that." Much, her bitchy smirk turned into a sneer. She crossed her arms and said, "God, you're so paranoid. Maybe I just like having friends. Maybe you're just jealous because I don't want some boring, insecure guy who can't handle a little fun." Her tone was venomous, like she enjoyed throwing my feelings in my face. I couldn't believe her audacity. I knew she'd lied, but hearing her deny everything like that made my blood boil even more. So I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence, screenshots of her sexting Jake, the explicit messages, the plans to meet up. Her eyes widened for a second, then her expression went cold. "See," I said, voice shaking, "this isn't just some innocent texting. You were planning to cheat on me. You were lying to my face about who Jake is, about everything. How could you do this, Lisa? How could you betray me like this, just days before our wedding?" She looked at me, eyes full of contempt, and sneered, "You think I care what you think? Honestly, you're so pathetic. You're so insecure that you think I'd cheat on you for no reason. Maybe I just wanted to have some fun and you're too clueless to see it. Why do you care so much? It's not like you're perfect." Her words hit hard. I felt my stomach churn. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead I just took a deep breath. I told her I was done. I couldn't be with someone who lied so easily, who thought she could manipulate me into thinking I was crazy. I told her the wedding was off, that I'd rather be alone than marry a woman who so clearly didn't respect me or our vows. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and spat. "You're making a huge deal out of nothing. Just another one of your insecurities. Honestly, you're lucky I even stayed with you this long." The venom in her voice made me realize she had no remorse, no guilt. She was just angry I caught her, angry I was ruining her plans to have her fun. I left her apartment that night feeling more lost than ever. I'd thought I knew who she was. I'd believed she loved me. But now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, bitchy woman who'd been cheating, lying, and pretending to be the perfect wife just to keep her little secret. I didn't sleep that night, just lying awake, wondering if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The love I'd had for her was turning into bitter resentment, and I knew I'd have to rebuild from the ashes of what I thought was my future. The days after that night were a blur of confusion, anger, and sadness. I couldn't help but replay everything in my mind, wondering how I failed to see the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulations. I kept thinking about the woman I married. Was she ever really honest with me? Or was she just pretending all along? The betrayal cut so deep that I questioned everything about our years together, our plans, our future. I tried to get back to some semblance of normalcy, but every time I saw her face in my mind, I felt this burning rage. It wasn't just about her cheating, though that was enough to shatter me. It was about the way she lied, the way she dismissed all my feelings, made me doubt myself. She told me I was insecure, controlling, paranoid. She turned everything into some kind of battle where she was the victim and I was the villain. But I knew the truth now, and that truth was hard to swallow. I started to think about what my next move should be. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after what I'd uncovered. But part of me wanted revenge. Not just to hurt her, but to make her realize that I wasn't some fool she could manipulate and walk all over. I wanted her to feel what that betrayal felt like, how it burned, how it shattered what little trust I had left. So I started planning. It was petty, maybe even childish, but I needed her to understand that I wasn't going to be her doormat. I decided I'd set a trap, a way to confront her with everything I knew in a way that would make her realize she'd lost control. I found some old messages from her to Jake, nothing explicit but suggestive enough, and I saved them. I also kept recordings of her bitchy attitude, her dismissiveness, her lies. I wanted her to see that I had evidence, that I was capable of exposing her bullshit. One evening, I texted, her pretending I was still interested in reconciliation, trying to bait her into a trap. She responded, furious, calling me all sorts of names. I played along, pretending to want to meet up to talk. When she arrived at my apartment, I told her I had something to show her, something she wouldn't believe. I played her the recordings, the messages. Her face went pale, then red with rage. "You're crazy. This is all lies," she spat, trying to deny everything. But I kept showing her the proof, screenshots of her sexts, recordings of her bitching about how she hated being married and wanted her freedom again. Her eyes darted around, and I could see the panic setting in. She knew she'd lost control. I told her I was done, that I'd made up my mind. I told her she'd betrayed me in the worst way, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. She tried to lie her way out, calling me a jealous lunatic, saying I was paranoid. But I just shook my head. I said, "No more lies, no more bullshit. You're done, Lisa. I want nothing to do with you." That was the moment I finally felt like I was reclaiming some power. It wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about peace. I couldn't live with someone who so blatantly lied, cheated, and disrespected everything we once had. That night, I finally made the decision to end things for good. I told her to pack her stuff and leave. I didn't want her there anymore. I wanted to cut her out of my life, to start healing myself from this mess. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew I had to do it for my own sake. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of her lies, pretending everything was okay. And as I watched her walk out that door, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. It's funny how love can turn into anger so fast, but I knew I'd be okay, eventually. In the days that followed her departure, I felt like I was slowly pulling myself out of a dark hole. The house was eerily quiet without her bitchy comments and manipulative smirks. I spent a lot of time alone, thinking about everything, the betrayal, the lies, the trust I'd lost. It hurt like hell, but at the same time, I knew I was better off without her. I started to realize how much I'd sacrificed for someone who didn't deserve it, for someone who only cared about her own pleasure and freedom. I took some time to focus on myself. I went out, reconnected with old friends, and finally admitted to myself that I'd been blind for too long. The love I had for Lisa was real, but it was also naive. I had ignored the warning signs because I wanted to believe in forever. Now I knew better. Love isn't just about passion or promises. It's about honesty, respect, and loyalty. Without those, nothing else matters. Looking back, I see how I was caught in a web of lies, and how her bitchy attitude, her constant lying, and her manipulative ways were all part of a pattern I refused to see. But I also see my own strength, how I refused to stay in a toxic situation I knew was killing my spirit. I learned that sometimes the truth hurts, but it's better than living a lie. I learned that trusting someone blindly can be the biggest mistake, and that you have to protect yourself, even if it means facing the pain of betrayal. Now, I'm finally starting to rebuild my life. I know it will take time, and I still feel the sting of everything she did, but I'm determined not to be broken by it. I want to move on, to find someone who will respect and love me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I've come to terms with the fact that I may never know exactly why she did it, why she cheated, lied, and turned out to be so cold. But I've accepted that I deserve better. For anyone out there going through something similar, here's what I've learned. Trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs, no matter how much you love someone. And when you find out the truth, face it head on. It's going to hurt, but it's better than living in denial or staying with someone who doesn't deserve you. You'll come out stronger, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I'm done looking back. I've got a future to rebuild, and I'm finally ready to start.